That's where an ecosystem works really well, where you're able to still play at larger enterprise deal-like companies instead of just a small business where you're like, oh, we do it all. Welcome back to season 2 of the Demand Gen Made Simple show. It's been a long time coming, and y'all, this season is going to be jam-packed with content. Season 1 had big names like Lotnie Conant, CRO of Sixth Sense, Sam Jacobs, CEO of Pavilion, Steven Hedenbrandt, co-founder and CMO of Dream Data, and so many more. But for season 2, we're taking a different approach. We're putting the marketer first, aka you. This season, we're focused on bringing in demand gen marketers like yourself to explore real-world questions and turn theoretical to practical. If you got a burning demand gen question that you want answered, there's a link in the show notes to apply to be a guest on the show. I'm your host, Janelle Amos, where thanks to you, season 1 was the top 20% of the most followed podcasts and top 15% most shared globally. I'm a former 3-time head of demand gen turned entrepreneur. I've consulted over 17 companies and counting to create demand gen strategies that work. I've done speaking engagements, masterclasses, live Q&As, and have been published in featured articles. Okay, so for the real reason you're here today, let's dive in. Hey, Jamie, thanks so much for hopping on the show.
Hi, Janelle. Nice to be on the show.
Awesome. So you hopped on the show because you have a burning demand gen question or challenge that you would like answered. So happy to dive into that a little bit more. What's your question for today?
Yes. So my question is around basically in a scenario where you're running demand generation motion, and you're optimizing for high intent inbound leads, hand raisers. In that scenario, if you're hitting your MQL target, you're hitting your number, but you're not seeing pipeline and revenue follow in the same way, where would you go in terms of analyzing why that could be happening? And what I'm particularly interested in is if lead quality isn't the glaring issue, where would you go from there to try and figure out why that could be happening?
Yeah, those are great questions. So first and foremost, we need to take off our marketing hat and put on our research or analyzing hat. Those are two different hats that I like to identify because marketer is all about like the top of the funnel and conversions that get them to the high intent stages, What we need to do from here on out is analyze the rest of the funnel journey. So we have to understand how the rest of the company handles high intent MQLs, handles the sales process, and handles considering an MQL to an opportunity and close one revenue. So if it's stage 0, stage 1, stage 2, open opportunity, every company has a different definition, right? But first we need to understand that. That's critical. So I think in terms of where do we go from here, what I found is that there's 3 culprits, if you will, to the why this is happening. So the one you mentioned is quality. So if whatever KPI is in front of the team, if it's MQL, the team's going to hit that. If it's SAOs, sales accepted opportunities, or like an S2 stage of an opportunity, marketing's going to hit those. The team's going to hit them. If we put a KPI number towards revenue, the team's going to hit them, right? Like, so first and foremost, we have to identify what is it that the KPI is that's important for us, for the team to hit. So it may or may not be MQLs. Maybe it's SAOs, maybe it's revenue. Every company is going to have a different preference. So first and foremost, quality. If the handoff between the MQL all the way to an open opportunity is low, I would suspect that it's a quality issue. So to your point, if it's not a quality issue, if it's making it to the conversion side of the open opportunities and it's not making it to a closed one, what I have found is the second culprit is marketing kind of wipes their hands clean in that handoff process where, cool, we hit our SAO or S2 target, where none of our budget or initiatives cover anything else once it hits opportunity, like marketing stops there. And I find that that's the biggest culprit, is not having a fluid, evergreen, full funnel campaign that's still actively targeting opportunities and not conflicting with sales activities, right? And then the third culprit for that is if we're still having a full funnel evergreen marketing initiative and it's still not piping into the revenue that we need, I would look into what that sales process or the follow-up method is. And this isn't just a marketer pointing fingers at sales. Like sometimes it actually is the culprit where marketing is the stronger team, and sometimes sales is the stronger team. But those are the 3 culprits that I found when hiccups happen down that funnel in the different stages. Does that help at all, or what questions do you have?
No, definitely. And I think it kind of logically kind of sequence into each other, which is helpful. I think the thing that I would be interested in is like when it gets to you can't find an issue in terms of quality, and then equally you think you're doing everything you need to be in terms of actually driving those leads through the funnel in an efficient way. When it does get to the sales process, that's an interesting point to me, because I think as a marketer, it can be quite tough to uncover those issues sometimes, especially if marketing and sales are not speaking the same language at times. Have you got any sort of advice for how you would uncover issues in the sales process as a marketer?
Yeah, totally. So first and foremost, I like to go into, say, if we're working with Salesforce or whatever CRM, and look at the different stages of the opportunities. So sometimes you can see, hey, this MQL converted high intent, they did a demo request. It automatically converts them into an open opportunity. At that time, a sales rep is supposed to follow up. If no activity has happened, and that's a consistent record that you pull from different opportunities, I would flag that with the sales leader and say, hey, what's going on with the follow-up here? That's a lack of sales process. So you can, dive into the CRM and look at the different stages and just kind of pulse check, pull 20, 50, 75, however many you need in order to actually paint that picture. But go into and actually see where is it stopping? Or if they're being stuck in a specific stage, look at the conversations that are happening. For example, if it's proposals or RFPs, a lot of time enterprise sales cycles have to have a lot of approvals, or they have to have business cases, or they have to have RFPs with other agencies or vendors. You can see what the common objections are, and you can create a hypothesis that this is one of the reasons why it's slowing it down. And you can use that to create more market education content, more, potentially webinars. You can invite them to air cover for a couple of ads on the opportunity stages to help educate and alleviate some of those objections. So really, it just boils down to rolling up your sleeves and getting into the CRM. Otherwise, you can also see if there's a problem with the processes. So how it's tagged in the CRM or like Salesforce. Is anybody getting notification? Like maybe it's tagged properly, but nobody's actually being notified of it. That's not a sales process. That's not a sales team fault. That's a process fault, right? So sometimes, just taking a look under the hood from a marketing perspective can help at least ask the questions and surface it with the leader, and then we can troubleshoot from there.
Cool. I suppose from my side as well, the other thing that would be interesting to get your input on is, so like when this issue arises, when I've had it sort of like I've had to dive into it, one thing that does come up is like if the sales cycle has increased, because obviously that's going to have knock-on effects in terms of us hitting our number month to month and et cetera, quarter to quarter. In your experience, like what would be your advice in terms of if there's been like a dramatic increase in the sales cycle? And again, maybe there's not like an immediate flag of, oh, we're bringing the wrong people in. What would be your approach in terms of like addressing that issue as a marketer?
When you say increase in sales cycle, it means like it's taking longer?
Yeah.
So I would ask if anything changed from the larger go-to-market motion. And the reason I ask that is a lot of time companies are going to say, we're going to go do enterprise. We're going to move up market, right? Obviously, that's going to come with a little bit larger of a longer sales cycle. That's going to come with a larger buying committee. So most of the times, if we can get in front of those conversations, we can say, hey, here's what to expect. Here's what we forecast. And as that happens, you have a little bit of like a cushion to take a step back on and say, hey, we talked about it increasing. It looks like it's increasing at a percentage lower or faster than what we forecasted. Let's keep a look on it and see if this is our new benchmark. What specifically comes to mind to you, like when you're talking about like the sales cycles? Or
so when I'm talking about this, when like an example would be actually not in terms of like there's not been a larger go-to-market change like on our side. Like it's more that maybe the market like has changed slightly, or like we're just noticing that deal cycles are just increasing and it's just taking longer for deals to close. But maybe there's not an immediate flag to us that quality is an issue or that we're bringing the wrong people in. So that would suggest that it might be external factors. I'm not saying that that's absolutely true, but it would suggest that there might be external factors at play. Obviously, that's an issue we need to address. Like for me, I'm kind of just looking for what's the best way to actually attack that, and like something I can control to actually make a positive change, I suppose.
Well, I think the next thing you need to do is you need to pulse check with the sales team and say, hey, are the recent leads in the last 30, 60, 90 days, however far you need to go based on your volume, are they good quality? Like, are you actually having good conversations? If all looks good and they're being tagged in the system as moving through the funnel, but they're lagging at a specific stage in the opportunities, I would agree with you. I don't think it's a quality issue as long as nothing else externally changed, like go to market, moving up market, changing ICPs, buyer personas, whatever. If all that seems consistent, I would agree it's not a quality issue. So then what I would look at is the market conditions, to your point. Now, what we need to analyze is if this is going to be a trend going forward. Has the market changed indefinitely? Or is this just a hiccup based on something that maybe we're doing internally that we could fix, right? So I think, I don't want to say marketers, but like people are very quick to, oh, it's just the market, oh, it's a sales problem. Like we're very quick to point fingers. So I always like to do like a pulse check of like, okay, well, let's analyze it. You could also talk to a couple of your peers in the industry and ask if their cycles have increased or decreased the last couple of months. If it's a common trend that you're pulse checking with other individuals who are in the same industry and kind of the same market as you, then we can use that again as our next hypothesis to say, this is probably going to be the market going forward. And next quarter, when we forecast marketing, we need to forecast it as X amount of deal stage, deal cycle, and use that going forward. Like there's going to be some level of inevitability with these type of forecasting models. So it's not always going to be 100%, right? So even as marketing hits or doesn't hit their numbers, it's always, what did we learn from this and what are we going to do different?
Cool. Yeah, so that's really helpful. I suppose it's just me trying, like being in situations where sometimes you're kind of asked, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got to go kind of figure it out. And sometimes there's not immediate answers that you can find just in your go-to reports day to day, even that, whether that's like lead grading or etc. And that's me kind of like basically trying to figure out what steps should you take once it's not immediately obvious. Where do you go? So that's actually really helpful. To be honest, a lot of it is me kind of trying to build out more of a process to follow, if that makes sense. Because it's just like I mentioned, I think on the previous call we had, it's one of these things where, like, I agree with you what you're saying in terms of you shouldn't leap to, oh, the market's changed, or like, oh, sales aren't doing their job, or because that's obviously like the go-to. It's like, oh, that must be what's happening. But like what we'll normally do is like we'll do our due diligence and try and go through everything and try and find, okay, where is the issue? What are we doing on our side? Is everything that we're controlling like working as it should be? And then when it's not obvious, then we all kind of hit a brick wall and we're sort of like, why is this happening? And that's me. This is basically my effort of trying to untangle, okay, if we don't have the answers from our sort of initial process, where do we go from there? Because there's got to be somewhere else we can go. So this is what's helpful for me now, trying to figure that out, basically.
You know what I like to say? Either go up or go out. So if you've done everything you can with your experience and your knowledge to the best of your abilities and you still can't figure it out, go the next level up. Maybe that is a VP, maybe that is a CMO, and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out X, Y, and Z. This is everything that I've done. I've concluded this. It still doesn't seem like this is a strong enough conclusion on what we're trying to solve. Have you encountered this before in your experience that could lead us down a couple other hypotheses that we could investigate? If the answer doesn't come from above, you can also go out, and this is where you tap your peers and a couple of the people, maybe even competitors. If you have friends, you can ask them because they're in the same market as you, right? Like you're selling the same product. You can go and you can ask them, hey, this is what we're trying to solve, whatever. Are you seeing that same trend for you? And you can just pulse check that. So go up or go out. That's what you tell people. Like you only know what you know, and you can't hold that against you. Like there's no way you're going to be able to figure it out if you've never done it before. So finding another way to tap a resource can be beneficial. And even if they just like throw you a cookie or like throw you a nugget where you can then go and like, okay, well, cool, I want to learn more about this. You can go down that rabbit hole. You can spend the time doing that. You just didn't know that that was a potential rabbit hole to even investigate.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing, is like me understanding what avenues there are to explore. And then kind of, and like you said, like a lot of that's going to come from talking to other people, because like this is just something that had just come up so much in the last couple of months where like there were questions that no one seemed to be able to answer. And even like when I'm talking to kind of like really smart people on my ops team are really good at kind of diving into the data, and like they're like, well, we can't find anything. And then you're kind of like, well, if they can't find an answer, like I'm not going to find an answer in the back end of the CRM. So then it's like, where do we go from there? And that's kind of like, for me, something that I actually will bring to the team after this actually is kind of like, because I might listen to, obviously I want to listen to some of this back again. bring that to the team because they might find it helpful for before I leave. Start building that in to how we deal with this, because there's been a point of friction between marketing and ops, where basically like ops are kind of, when we like come to them with these questions, they're like trying to understand, why do you need to know this, or like we don't necessarily have the answers, and then we're not trying to be proactive. So then hopefully if we can build more of a process around it, it's more like we can work on it together, rather than it be like us kind of just asking them questions and them coming back with a limited answer, and then us trying to go back with another limited answer, and it becomes a bit of a mess basically.
Pull ops into those conversations instead of trying to go to them thereafter, make them feel a part of the conversation and heard and valued, and then have that with key takeaways. Okay, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. We're going to regroup next week on this call to discuss our key findings. And that way it's less from, I don't know, like you or like the team, right? Where it's like, hey, hey, hi, me again. Hey, hi, me again. It's more of like, hey, go to market leadership. Here we are. This is the challenge that we're facing. Kind of elevates the conversation a little bit more to make people want to contribute to those type of conversations, is what I found. I don't know if that's useful or not, but see if you can try and pull them in ahead of the conversation.
It is, yeah. I think that's kind of what I'd love to try and kind of work on maybe before I go with everyone. It's basically it feels super reactive at the moment with this specific type of question, where like we see something pacing through the month, and then it's like obviously leadership kind of like, well, why is this happening? Like what's going on here? And then it kind of all filters down through the org, and then it just becomes like this kind of, well, we need to figure it out. And it's like, at the moment, there's no agreed upon kind of way of working on it together. I feel like it's like what you just said, where it's like kind of you're going to them. It's like, oh, I've got another question. No, it's a few weeks later. And that's not productive for anyone. So
for anyone. Yeah.
I think that's the thing, is like, if we can build more of like a way of work around it that works for both teams, that will be really helpful for the team. So
also with y'all's stage of where you're at in the company, it might be valuable to set up some deltas. So for example, you should have enough forecastable data now to say, hey, we see a delta of this percent or this amount around this time of the year, either selling increases or decreases, or this increases or decreases. And that way, month over month or even week over week, as leadership is looking at this beautiful dashboard that I'm sure is accurate, and they see a dip, it doesn't go down the rabbit hole of, oh my God, we're dipping, like everything's wrong. It's like, no, we're fine. There's an average delta of this, give or take, right? They give us until X, Y, and Z date or quarter. And if we don't iron things out, then we'll investigate. But marketing one day is going to drop, the next day is going to explode. Like it's one almost unforecastable in a week over week timeline. I think so. And it's even harder to go in and say, okay, the change that I make today is going to impact tomorrow. Like very rarely does that actually happen. It takes time to compound those type of changes and to get that data into a dashboard that executives like to look at. That's not a one day to the next day type of update. And so be proactive, start those conversations now with your market automations team, and figure out some reporting deltas and say, is this like a common seasonality? And that way, you can go back and you can say, hey, it's not marketing or it's not sales. It's just a season. And you have data to back it up, and you're not just like pointing fingers a different direction or not wanting to assume accountability. You actually have a report that has been carefully and thoughtfully crafted to have those type of conversations. Hey, Bill, thanks so much for joining us. What's your question for today?
Hey, Janelle, I want to know, what is the thought around partner-led growth and how you think about using your ecosystem to build demand gen for your organization?
That's a great question. And actually, partner-led growth is on the rise. Go-to-market partners, they do a lot of research on that as well. I'm actually ambassador for them. So I've read a lot of the research that they've been coming out on, and the percentage of companies that are starting to look at partner-led growth and using that as an ecosystem to drive demand is on the rise. But I think there's a lot of gaps right now that are going to prohibit companies from doing it successfully. So a couple things that I would keep in mind if that's a strategy that you're looking to implement is to make sure that it's right for your company. And what I mean by that is having a partner-led direction, one, can't be in silo. It absolutely needs to be a part of the other go-to-market motions, and it needs to be measured with it, not separately. That said, it does need to have its own KPIs in order to see if it's working or if it's not working and how it plugs in relation to everything else. But it definitely needs to have, I think, also a leader that's leading that motion. You can't just roll it under somebody else too. And then being able to understand if it's right for the business model. And what I mean by that is sometimes partners or an ecosystem, they don't always work with the model. So let's see, a good example would be myself as consulting. I have a couple other, I call them non-exclusive, non-competitive, which means I have more than one partner, but they don't compete in any way, shape, or form. So I have one like for a content marketing agency, I have one for an operations agency, I have one for a website design, multiple partners, but we're complementary to each other, right? And I was
just going to say, what I'm hearing you say then is like, be thoughtful about your strategy up front and making sure you understand where each of those partners sit in the ecosystem so it reduces the channel conflict potential down the road.
Exactly. And to that, make sure that you have the resources in order to make them successful too. So for example, if I were to work with my content marketing agency, like we're complementary, we plug and play. There's never an area where it's like, well, why don't you do demand gen or why don't I do demand? Just like, no, you're my demand gen person and plug and play. So if you think of areas like AWS or Google or Azure, right? Like all of them have that same plug and play model. So think about like integrations, right? Think about other data providers. Think about things that are complementary that work well, where you're not necessarily in a market where you're competing against them. It's like, no, we'll plug and play. But that only works if your product allows it, right? And that only works if your audience allows that too. So normally partner-led growth is a lot more, I would say, efficient and effective in an enterprise model because most of enterprise companies already have a pretty sophisticated tech stack. They have people in-house that are running the tech stack and they don't want to go and gut something out and replace it. They want somebody to come in and be complementary to fix that one problem that they have. That's where an ecosystem works really well, where you're able to still play at those larger enterprise deal-like companies instead of just a small business where you're like, oh, we do it all. Cool. That's a whole different conversation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would echo what you just said about enterprise. I've seen that most effective at the enterprise level because a lot of times those partners have the relationships already then compared to maybe like an independent software vendor where why spend the time and the cycles on your demand gen investments to go direct to customer or direct to prospect when the relationships are already established and known through the partners. Leverage that trust that's already built up and then help them to build your brand as you're trying to get into those accounts as well.
Yeah. And to your point, there's got to be a critical effort involved in that. Like you got to do co-selling, you got to do co-marketing. There's got to be a rhyme and reason behind that in order for that to actually be successful. Hey, Nhi, thanks so much for hopping on the podcast today. What is your burning demand gen question that I can help with?
So my burning demand gen question is that, like with every team, especially on marketing, we want to give our sales team more demo requests. But I think the hard part is that there are so many steps leading up to a prospect requesting for a demo. So I'm curious to know, how have you managed this sort of conversation with sales to let them know that there's a little bit more attribution work to really learn the journey of the prospect before they reach the demo request? Yeah.
That is a great question, and actually one that I receive quite often. And just like in marketing 101, like the basics, if we take a step back, what we were taught in school, we were taught at the very beginning, is to deliver your message based on your audience. And so when we think about what's important to sales, it's conversations, it's meetings, it's having those actual demos being shown. And they care less about the journey or how many steps it takes to get them there. They need to have that trust for marketing more than the understanding of the flow in the process. So to give a little more context behind that, how do you establish trust with the sales team? When you're first joining a team or getting hired and working with the sales team, the first thing that I like to do is to ask them what's that number one thing that they need, what they've been dying for or needing for. And whenever they tell you that, you go and you make that happen. And you're here to show them that you're not just here to talk the talk. I'm going to do all these great things. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to align marketing and sales. Like I'm here to walk the walk. Like we're here to actually get stuff done together. And I'm going to prove my partnership to you by taking something that's a priority and helping us collectively get there. So after that happens, then you say, by the way, this is my plan. This is how we're going to get you more demo requests. These are the marketing activities that are going to get us there. An estimated time frame is X, Y, and Z weeks or X, Y, and Z months, however that journey looks like. And if they have questions, absolutely answer and address them. But I would be very, very focused on what is it that matters to them, how you're going to get them there, and how long it's going to take. The journey, that's marketing. That's sales leadership. That's executive conversations in terms of the mapping, the go-to-market strategy. But if you're meeting with just the sales team and they're interested in how to get more demos, I would focus more on what we're actually going to do to fix that than worrying about educating them about the buyer's journey. Marketing is marketing, sales is sales. And at the end of the day, we need to learn how to speak each other's languages. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, totally. So don't share how the sausage is made, essentially. Like, let's just talk about what time we're going to deliver what, right?
Yeah. And if they have questions, of course, answer. But most of the sales team are just like, cool, okay, back to their work, cool, okay, thanks, and then kind of they dip on back to their world, just like it's our world. And so marketers actually tend to say, this is all the things we're going to do. And, we're going to increase our PPC or our CTRs or our conversion rates. And sales is like, huh? What's PPC? Yeah. What's CTR? What's an LP? And they forget that our acronyms, our lingo, our brains think differently. And so I always remind myself, marketing 101 is to tailor your message based on your audience. And so if you don't quite know what sales needs or is interested in, or how to really get that aha moment with them when delivering what you're going to do for your plan, meet with somebody one-on-one, either if that's the leader of the team or just a buddy that you have made, and ask them, what are some things that are important? What are going to be some questions that you can anticipate? Does this deck resonate with you? And another point, I just got squirrel brain that I remembered. If you're doing a presentation or a deck, whatever you say and whatever you have written on the presentation, they can only focus on one at a time, just humans in general, not salespeople. So either add all the words to the slide and just let them read it and be like, I'll take a minute for you guys to read that, or only add key points in bold or underlined and then speak towards the narrative, but understand what journey you want to take them on, just like what we would do for a marketing lens with a buyer's journey, right? Yeah. What journey, what are the touch points, what are the anticipated questions, objections, blah, blah, blah. Same thing. Advocating for internal marketing to the other departments is going to be just as important as we would put that attention towards an actual prospect journey. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Demand Gen Made Simple show. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving a review, as it really helps me reach more people just like you. And make sure to subscribe so you can be notified when the next episode drops. Thank you, and see you next time.